morning, everybody. It's good to be with you all. My name is Kris Shaw, as Leo said, and I did want to today talk to you about hallucinogens, or what I interchangeably term medicines, and then Buddhism / meditation. I've been I'm not an expert in any regard, although I have a lot of experience in both arenas. As indicated, I've been a public defender for 20 years. I've been a Buddhist, depending on your math, for about 30 years. And I started hallucinogens from the age of 13. I started smoking marijuana when I was 12, and then actually I smoked with my mom because she also smoked, and she thought it would be safer if I just smoked with her. But at the age of 13, I got introduced to mushrooms, and you might wonder what lunatic introduced a 13-year-old child to mushrooms. And in my mother's defense, that drug is the laughing drug. When I did it at 13 years old, I don't remember laughing that much, but I still enjoyed it. I found it interesting. It was definitely a unique experience. And ever since then, I've very casually, I certainly have issues with hedonism, but when it comes to the medicines, I've been pretty moderate, but I've also been at it for 40 years. When I was 16, I started eating LSD, ingesting LSD. And that went on through, for a while, for a long time. And of course, DMT, the toad stuff, and ketamine has been a recent introduction into my life that I'm very impressed by. Especially ketamine, just to say, is one of the most powerful and easiest and smoothest ways of obtaining experiences of egolessness, if I may be so bold. So, in any, especially with the injections. But in any event, so I've been into the medicines for a long time, and so then, well, how did I find Buddhism? I might as well just say a little bit about that. Partly it was medicines. I found Buddhism as a couple confluence or congruent events that seemingly were coincidental, but I was a philosophy major. I happened to take a real interest in Eastern philosophies, from Ralph Waldo Emerson, Eric Fromm, D.T. Suzuki, whatever. I mean, Herman Hesse, everything. And started reading Ram Dass, Dr. Richard Alpert, who was teaching at Harvard with Timothy Leary. And anyway, so I was reading a lot of Buddhism. And then, there's kind of a heaven and hell aspect of what brought me to Buddhism. The hell aspect was, I had a fractured childhood. My although my mom was a very hip lady, the family dynamics were very dysfunctional. And so obviously, as I grew up, I had very dysfunctional relationships. I was grossly afflicted by my thoughts and my emotions. And as I got older, and having more experience actually with hallucinogens, where like a windshield wiper, they would kind of just wipe away a lot of that discouragement. I wanted more of that, so the hell aspect brought me to Buddhism and got me on a meditation cushion, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to change without meditating. And then there was the heaven aspects of some of these drugs, where you have, deeply profound experiences of now, deeply profound experiences of self that are not contained in a 5'6" body. But that you're much more vast than that. Deep experiences of vast, limitless awareness and limitless love and compassion, with MDMA in particular, with ecstasy in particular. And so that, in conjunction with my reading of Buddhism, it got me very interested, because these experiences that I was having on these medicines were correlated to what I was reading. This correlation, obvious and interesting. Ram Dass, again, Timothy Leary, who hung out with Timothy Leary when he went to India, he did so because he wanted to see what was being taught in India that correlated with these profound experiences he was having in Harvard with LSD and mushrooms and so on. and Aldous Huxley, who wrote The Perennial Philosophy, The Doors of Perception, about mescaline, and other books. The Island also is a great book. But all these books, all these authors, Alan Watts, another one, they all had experience with hallucinogens. And Aldous Huxley actually had his wife inject him with LSD at the very last moments of his life. Laura Huxley injected and forgive my voice, I've been a little sick lately. But in any event, I think Laura Huxley injected him with LSD at the end of his life, which, as an aside, I would not recommend. But anyway, these are big movers and shakers in terms of introducing these Buddhism into North America, and they saw a very strong correlation between the medicines and meditation. Then, when I was 22, just quickly, I read "Be Here Now" by Ram Dass. That just blew my mind. That's where he talks about getting his mind read by these teachers and other kind of miracle experiences. And I just thought to myself, either this guy isn't telling the truth, or he is. And if he's telling the truth, then no one I've ever met knows anything. Because where I grew up in Ohio, we weren't talking about mind reading, and I mean, like crazy level of detail. It just never was talked about where I came from, at least. So, and I really believe that Ram Dass was telling the truth. So I wanted to follow that. Moved to Boulder, Colorado, and 2 years later, I had a great fortune of meeting a lot of extremely highly realized beings, and including my teacher now, and got my mind read like a back of a cereal box. And not like, like you were thinking this last night, you had this dream last night. I mean, that kind of level of detail wasn't up for question whether they knew it or didn't. And got my mind blown, got nature of mind pointed out to me, which is a big job of a guru. And so in any event, that's how I got into Buddhism. I wrote this, you guys may know me from this book cover that you can see on your screen. I hope Chronic Dissatisfaction is baked into the cake of human existence. And I also wrote Is Rigged. I didn't really write these books. I do have the book cover in any event. Is that visible, Leo? But I have to say, Buddhism does start with the presupposition that that life is suffering. Actually, I hate to be downer. In fact, I'm going to come back to one quote. Give me 1 second. Okay, I came across this quote recently, and I just think it's so beautiful by Leonard Cohen. Nothing in this human realm is meant to work. So once you can deeply appreciate that, the mind of passion grows when you understand that everybody's up against it. And I just think that's, Buddhism is not about, just so you know, it's not about becoming happy. In fact, to quote Chogyam Trungpa, the other main seed planter of Dharma in North America, especially Tibetan Buddhism, and a wild teacher, very wild teacher, like crazy wisdom kind. He said, "It is my duty to inform you. It is hopeless. You will not be happy." And we all think that happiness is always just around the bend. We just got this next job, this next woman, this next guy, this next meal, whatever it is. It's always just around the bend. And people can be happy for moments, but everything's in flux from a Buddhist perspective. So, but that it can be converted, like Leonard Cohen says, into compassion, then that's just fine. So in any event, that's how I got into Buddhism, for what it's worth. And, so then the question is, well, where do these medicines and the meditation meet? And I think they meet primarily from what I've read and from my own experience, is that when I'm on these medicines, at times, there's no contraction. There's no uprightness. There's no self-referentiality. There's just being present. And whether it's boundless awareness or boundless love, either way, those are not experiences that I normally experienced in my life. So when I have these experiences on the medicines, I wanted to follow up on that. I wanted more of that. I wanted more freedom. And I was tired of living a life being victimized by my thoughts and my emotions. I mean, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting. I mean, everyone's tired of that. I don't care whether you meditate or not. No one's not exhausted by that. So, in any event, I wanted to get more of that. And I will note, just as a side effect, or just one point, when I and most people I talk to describe these experiences of vast openness, vast relaxation, experiences of no self, they don't think, when they look back on it and say, oh, that's a baloney experience because I was on drugs. We actually think, that's who I really am. And even though that all counts for 0.002% of my life, it actually has more significance to me in terms of who I am and who we are than the other 99.99998% of my life. So, and from a Buddhist perspective, the point is, we're not discovering anything. We're just refining it, right? We're not creating anything. The sun is always shining. We are always inherently awareness. We are always inherently love and compassion. No doubt that's obscure for many of us, but just like, not my analogy, but when the clouds part, you will see the sun. The sun is always shining. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So Buddhism doesn't work from a presupposition that we're inherently flawed or sinful, not to disparage other religions. It's fine. But Buddhism works from the presupposition that we are inherently awake and we just forgot. And that, quite frankly, to put it really bluntly, was my experience on these medicines. I'm like, when I was sober afterwards, I was like, that's who I am. I mean, or at least that's closer to who I am than the other 99.99% of my life, which is really depressing, actually, if you want to think about it. But in any event, what we can do. So I think that these medicines and meditation meet when first of all, they very deeply make you question your assumption of who you are. I think most people walk away with a different experience of who they are when they do these. Secondly, I think people have a very deep questioning about the seemingly solid external world as well. Your notion of what's out there is also much more groundless. And then the relationship between mind seemingly in here and the external world seemingly out there is up for question. Because you're like, is that live or is it Memorex? Like, am I creating this? Is this happening? Drugs? Is it, it's radical subjectivity, and it's hard to kind of find your ground. Whereas normally we live a life where I'm in here, external world. And for most people who've read any Buddhism or other traditions know separation is absolute delusion. There's no question about it. Separation.
Sorry to interrupt. May I interrupt for just 1 second? There are a few folks who just joined us, and I just want to remind everyone if they can please mute themselves, just because I want to make sure that we can hear Kris speak. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Yeah, sorry, no problem. So believe it or not, separation is an illusion. So how do you know if you're awake? Well, if you're experiencing duality, it's a good sign we still got some work to do. I am, by the way, stuck in duality for now. So in any event, I think the inquiry into who we are, how solid the external world is, what the relationship is between mind and the external world, which, just as one more aside, I would deeply encourage. I don't proselytize. Like, I don't care if people do medicine. I don't care if people meditate, and I don't care if people are Buddhists. Like, I have no agenda in that regard. I got my own life to live. I got my own troubles, and I'm just trying to do that. But I'm happy to share and talk with people if they're interested. But lucid dreaming is a very profound spiritual path, spiritual practice. And it really invokes the question right there. What is the relationship between mind and the external world? And later I can share an email. And if people want to hit me up later or my text about any questions that we can't cover during our time today, I'm happy to follow up with author suggestions or book suggestions or whatever it is. Excuse me.
Man, this is awkward.
Uh,
I'm supposed to like join like a religious event for class, and you had to type in your name and blah blah blah. But this
event?
Yeah, I don't like that. Like, that's like that's kind of messed up. That's like intrusive.
Why are you joining that?
I have to for class for credit, and it's awkward because it's like an actual Zoom. It's usually like a webinar, so it's like whatever. This is a Zoom with somebody speaking.
I'm so sorry. Is this,
Why do you have to do that?
yeah,
For class.
okay.
It's dumb. I know.
Alyssa, can you hear me? Do you mind muting yourself for a moment? I'm not sure if you're having a prior conversation. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that.
oh, no. No
Yeah.
problem.
It's Mercury in retrograde. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Welcome to Samsara. Everything is broken. So in any event, and I think another thing that these drugs and Buddhism meet at is that we are fundamentally awareness and love and compassion. Obviously, as I said before, these medicines can give you a very different orientation of the present moment, of now, where you can really kind of experience almost the infinite nowness, where there's no self, it's just now. And in any event, I think the culmination of where these things meet, I don't know if a lot of people take it this far, but for me, it kind of brought up the whole question of, what thoughts are true. It gave me a very deep skepticism of my thoughts, because I realized that what was keeping me from living in the present moment, what keeps me from living in the present moment is like a worm, a fish, I should say. I keep biting on the same worm with the hook underneath it. And I know that it's nothing but suffering. And I keep getting hurt, but I keep doing it. I continue to be a victim of my thoughts and my emotions. So meditation and I wanted to extricate myself from that, but I wasn't going to be able to do hallucinogens every day. I didn't really see how that was a viable route. So I thought, well, then I'll try to meditate. And when you meditate, at least from our tradition, you just generally with your eyes open, to be clear, but you just, when you have a thought, you say thinking. And then what do? Just come back to reality. Just come back to your body and come back to your breath. I mean, there's an inherent beauty in that practice, I have to say. So in any event, meditation was a way of continuing the queries that started from the medicines. And this quote up here, what is it that looks out of our eyes, is just a kind of a way I use this as a meditation practice. Like literally ask myself, who is looking out of these eyes? There's a great quote by Adyashanti that I don't have here. If someone wants it later, you can email me. It's a great instruction from Adyashanti about this very topic. And just to be not too linear, so forgive me, but just to kind of go through this, this I think is also a beautiful quote. The optimal strategy and behavior with yourself and others is compassion. I mean that, if you just make that your central practice in your life will be valuable in my humble estimation. But so I have a very deep skepticism of thoughts. And that started with the hallucinogens, the medicines, but I didn't know how to continue the inquiry. I didn't know how to continue. I wanted to keep unhooking myself, and I'm still doing that. Now, that's where I'm at now, is just trying to keep, I bit on the hook, unhook, and keep doing that as a practice. But no one has ever thought their way out of this mess. I don't care how smart you are. I've never met anyone as smart as they are who's actually thought their way out of samsara. It just doesn't happen. We can feel our way. We can feel our way into it. And so there's a lot of spiritual language about letting go. And I don't mean to be derisive of that, but I generally don't know what people mean by it. I really don't, except I don't want to feel suffering, so I'm going to avoid it. Is usually how I hear it. But, Buddhism flips ego on its head. And, actually, if you think about it in terms of bad trips, bad trips, LSD trips or whatever, like, I can't remember the book. Oh, yeah. Storming, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. he talks about bad trips, and his injunction, admonition, is to move into it, not to run, not to resist, not to fight, but to move into it. And that's counterintuitive, it's counterinstinctual, it's counterhabitual. And quite frankly, all of Buddhist practice is counterintuitive, counterinstinctive, and counterhabitual. Just the simplistic practice of being with your breath in your body. It's like I was saying yesterday with Leo, there's a common quote, don't just do something, sit there. There's nothing in our culture that encourages you to just be present. There's nothing. Even people who are interested in our scene, medicine or whatever, they want to put their cape on and go fix things out there. That's very easy. But I think if you only work on the projected, but you don't work on the projector, however well-intentioned you are, I think you're missing. You could give a little bit more just by spending a little bit more time taking the cape off. But anyway, no one's ever thought their way out of this mess. This is one of my favorite spiritual quotes. And by the way, you can use it for your favorite political fixations as well. Do not seek the truth, only cease to cherish opinions. A lot of practice is just letting go of conceptual fixation. I got glimpses of that with the medicine. But I didn't know how to continue it with the medicine. And I honestly, just put it really bluntly, I don't know a human being who credibly says they're fully awakened from medicines. Maybe it exists. I'm highly dubious of it, but there are many, many, many masters who are fully awake from meditation. And what does it mean to be awake? Well, it means you discover who you are fundamentally in a sustained recognition of realizing fundamental truth of no self, fundamental truth of emptiness of phenomena. That's what enlightenment is. In any event, we're not going to think our way out of this mess, but for our purposes, if you're highly discursive and you're highly fixated, go elevator down. It's telling you something. It's telling you you're resisting feeling something you don't want to feel. So you rather spin out and think about what a moron that person is, right? You want to spin out and think about what a moron that person is rather than just feel the anger, right? But if you want an open heart, feel the anger, because the anger isn't what you think it is anyway, okay? We spend our whole life, insanity is believing a granite banana should be yellow, right? This is a Kris Shaw original. You'll see it in my next book. We spend our whole life judging everything. Everything should be different. Everything should be different. And if everything out there should be different, I should be different. If you think about the amount of time you spend your life just doing that one thing, just that one thing, if that doesn't bring you to near tears, I don't know what will, what percent of our life do we spend judging other people and ourselves about how, and the external world about how things should be different? All the while, are we bringing more awareness or love by doing that? I'm dubious about that. So another Kris Shaw original. Every emotion is love in disguise. Every emotion is love in disguise. If you hang out with the energy of an emotion, devoid of concept, you will have, I promise you, profound experiences. I promise you. Got to go in to get out. Everyone knows that one. Oh, hey, people like sticks. I'm 52, so just remember, it's a grand illusion. Deep inside, we're all the same. Anyway, all right. So I think that's primarily where these things meet. Fundamental questioning of self, external world, and the relationship, and also the experience of being fundamentally awareness and love. But I didn't know how to continue with the medicines. I just didn't know. There wasn't much more I could do with them. Now I can do the medicines in the context of Buddhism and meditation, and I find it to be extremely beneficial. But in any event, but those experiences are when I felt most at home. And again, they account for an infinitesimal percentage of my life. In any event, I don't mean to be a pusher. I'm just saying if you get a taste from the medicine, you might want to follow up with some kind of meditation practice to get some sustained recognition or realization. And again, Buddhism is a science of mind. It's been developed over 2,500 years. Oh yeah, I think I lost my thread. But I did want to say, not only is Buddhism counterintuitive and counter habitual and counter-instinctive in terms of like just sitting there, but for people, for example, who aren't familiar with Pema Chodron, the practice of Tong Wen and Lojong, where you put others before yourself, put others before, like if you spend your life trying to put others before you, like how subversive is that to ego? That is subversive. That is literally so subversive to ego. And that's all Buddhism is. Oh, and then also, don't, what is the Tong Wen practice? Breathe in the negative, breathe out the positive. Take in the negative, give the positive away for other people. That is a radical, turn ego on its head practice. Counter-instinctive, counter-habitual, but extremely radical and productive. And just like I said earlier, dropping the storyline and being willing to feel a feeling, feel the energy of an emotion. Very powerful practice. So usually we forget to do it because habit is so strong. And I don't care if you've been practicing for 30 years or not. Please, I know you know me, but listen to this one thing. Don't ever underestimate the power of habit. And you cannot underestimate the power of habit. I mean, it's ego, and ego will co-opt everything. I don't care if you're a spiritual practitioner, if whatever you do, ego will have its place. So you gotta keep an eye out for ego. But in any event, let me see here. Oh, I like that quote. Doesn't really, yeah, if my heart could do my thinking and my head begin to feel, I look upon the world anew and know it's truly real. That's Van Morrison. So for me, I guess the question was, do I want to live my life? Or do I want to live my concepts about life, right? Do I want to try to serve others, or do I want to keep trying to do the same old thing that's, by the way, not bringing me happiness anyway, right? That's the thing. Like, I mean, if your habits are working for you, that's great. But I don't think I've met a person who says they are. Normally, we try to put ourselves first. We want to have all of our cookies, and then maybe we'll share some. And, at least where I grew up, in terms of habits, I never even heard of the idea of not believing thoughts and concepts. Like, they didn't teach me that in school. Like, that should be, if thoughts and emotions run you around, if your whole life is dictated and directed by thoughts and emotions, don't you think by the age of like 6, someone should start getting you hip to that fact? I wish someone had told me. I could have got this game started a little bit earlier. So, to me, that's the question. Do you want to live your life through concepts, or do you want to just try to be as present as you can with your life? And actually, that book, Be Here Now, by Ram Dass, it's the book title isn't Be Here Now. The book title is Remember, Be Here Now, which is very important, because remembering, reminders are, put stuff up on your mirrors, whatever, and then trade them out as you start to ignore them. But in any event, so yeah, I think one thing I do want to say is about Buddhism. You're not going to get I don't think you can get this from the medicine so much. I don't think. I haven't done all of them, but in Buddhism and meditation, you can bring everything on the path. That's like when you eat, when you go to the bathroom, every emotion you have, every thought you have, positive or negative, whatever your label is. And of course, again, not to be negative, but I think we all know how this novel ends. Buddhism is whatever percent you want to say is about how to live a life. That's good. That's fine. But it's also about how to die. Now, again, that involves concepts of reincarnation and karma that many people on this conversation and otherwise might not have. But, Living is Dying is a great book. My teacher's book, Mind Beyond Death, is a great book. For those people who believe that, like in a dream, when your body basically is immobile, but your consciousness continues to create things that you believe to be true, even though they're not. In the same way, after you die, consciousness travels and creates appearances that you believe to be real. And they're not always necessarily pleasant. And but in any event, Buddhism and meditation can allow you to basically be open to all situations, to be aware and open-hearted in all situations. So I I think that is, oh yeah. And then just to finish the point, I guess, and again, I know people don't necessarily believe in karma and reincarnation. That's totally fine. But, you know, especially nowadays, because Buddhism is co-opted by Western authors and stuff like that. And they want to tell you that Buddhism is only about mindfulness. It's just not true. I mean, I'm sorry. Sam Harris is one quintessential example. It's just wrong. You know, and you can't take out reincarnation and karma because you think it's superstitious. You know, you just can't do it. And basically, from a Buddhist perspective, if you want to plant seeds for a positive life for yourself, you know, then cultivate awareness, cultivate compassion, and serve others. You know, are some simple ways to create a good future for yourself to the degree that you believe that you reincarnate. If you think that it's lights out, then, you know, do what you do. That's totally fine. But even in a limited life, even if there's only one lifetime, a lot of people still want to live the best life they can live. And you got to change your own channel because no one's going to do that for you. And I don't, you know, the medicines can get you so far. I know I've said this before. The medicines can get you so far. I just don't think they get you home. But they give you a glimpse. They wake you up to some degree to get you interested and curious. So that's kind of what I have. I hope it's a benefit. That's a sincere thing. But if anyone has any comments or questions, that's great.
So I'd like to jump in for a second before. So just feel free to either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. I think that's an option with Zoom. But I was going to start with two questions that might branch off into two other questions. Who knows? One thing that came up for me was yesterday when you were talking, you had mentioned your experience with the Grateful Dead, and I was hoping you could talk about that a little bit because so often we see almost cults, I would, for lack of a better word, in that intersection between psychedelics and Buddhism. Like when you think about the Beatles going to, oh, maybe he was a Hindu. I don't know. So I mean, I just feel like there's so much there, especially in the 60s and 70s. And I feel like we're having like this new psychedelic revolution now. And okay, but the other thing I was going to ask you was, as you go into your experience, your medicine experience, or your meditation, or vice versa, do you feel like the skills you've learned through your meditation have enabled you to get more out of your journey? Because you touched briefly on lucid dreaming, which, you know, these people, I would imagine, who are into psychedelics and Buddhism would want to be learning about lucid dreaming because that sounds super trippy and cool. And yeah, so.
Yeah, well, in terms of the Grateful Dead, yeah, I should have said I had some additional training with some of my friends, one of whom is on this phone call right now. For me, you know, I mean, I still see the dead. I still sometimes trip when I see them. But, you know, the Grateful Dead, like Ram Dass said, the Grateful Dead is the last sacramental church in the United States, right? You know, eat some acid and, you know, you can have experiences of non-duality. You can have experiences of flow. You can have experiences of present moment. For me, 5 times, I also had some very unpleasant experiences. I think set and setting really matter when you do these medicines. So mixing it up with a lot of electricity going through your body from the music and 70,000 people, questionable for some, works for others, usually worked for me, didn't always. But I was either dumb enough or brave enough to keep going at it. I don't know which actually, but in any event, in general, I think more restrained environments are probably safer. But in any event, yeah, I mean, the Grateful Dead was obviously a very huge influence in, you know, and I'm not the only one, in hallucinogens and in Buddhism. And, you know, there's a lot of people who find very strong Buddhist lyrics in the Grateful Dead for what it's worth. And in terms of the skills for meditation, what informs what, you know, for now, only because I've been studying, I honestly am stuck in duality as much as anybody else, but I've studied so much for 30 years. Like if I ever do a ketamine trip, my teacher's always there. Lineage people are always there. You know, it's just always the way it is. But yeah, I mean, the more you cultivate spaciousness of mind and spaciousness of heart, you know, the better I think you're going to be able to navigate things. Or if you almost get hooked by a bad trip, you might be able to more easily discard it. You know, that's one thing. And then in terms of lucid dreaming, again, I mean, right? Why not? If you're sleeping for 8 hours a night, you might as well, if you like to practice during the day, you might as well not lose a third of your day. You can practice while you're sleeping. And there's ways of doing it. There's ways of cultivating lucid dreams. And then you can do whatever you want in your dream. You can ask the universe questions. You can ask your guru questions. You can do it. You fly, obviously. You can have, obviously, you can have whatever physical relationships you want, if that's how you want to spend your time. I'm not opposed to that personally. I don't lucid dream with enough regularity that I'm going to waste. If I'm gonna lucid dream, I'm gonna try to have it forward my spiritual path. But in any event, I don't know if that fully answers it, but it kind of touches on some topics. And if anyone else has anything they want to say, by all means, right? I mean, you don't just have to hear from me, right? Wait, I lost you, Leo. I lost you.
I muted myself. The Ram Dass book, Be Here Now, I remember reading that when I was 20 or something. And I remember having people kind of make fun of it to some degree, but I forget if it was Ram Dass who had that famous quote. I know other people have said that quote as well, where he had given his Hindu, right. teacher, like all of these acid tabs.
Right.
And then the Hindu teacher was like, like I achieved this already. And that, and I think a lot of us have had those experiences where we're like, I don't know if I need to do medicine as much anymore because I now have gotten to that place. You mentioned like those places of like catharsis or peace or something that change you. And then it's kind of like going back and doing the integration work.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, so Neem Karoli Baba, Ram Dass went to him and Neem Karoli Baba asked for this LSD. So Ram Dass gave him a ton. And the guy was older. The guru was older. And he goes under his blanket after he ingests the LSD. And then he comes out all wild-eyed, like Ram Dass is like, oh my God, I just killed my guru, it's unbelievable. And then the guru, it didn't touch him, right? And Chogyam Trungpa from Boulder, Colorado, well known at Naropa University, he ate LSD with his students and didn't touch him either. Yeah. So what was your question on that? Just the concept that I think sometimes we are, you talk about this craving that we're all craving control. I think you had talked a lot about control yesterday as well. And I identified with that, with struggling with control issues and wanting to control things. And you had the picture of the banana, I think, of wanting the banana to not be a banana. So, I mean, I think a lot of times I think all of us are having that struggle for control, but also we're living in this capitalist culture where there's so much competition and there's so much competition around this race and psychedelics of like, hey man, did you try like the latest DMT experience? And, we just had a friend visit that was like, oh man, I was at this party and in one room they had DMT and in one room they had cocaine and in one room they had this. And I'm like, man, that would not appeal to me. Like you just spoke about these 70,000 people at a concert. I get very impacted by sensory stuff. So that would be a panic attack for me. And so when I think about how people are doing it in this cavalier way, or they're doing it this way of like, man, if you take these 3 things, you'll get even more of a boost and you'll get like the best. So you want the best and you want the greatest trip ever. And I wonder if we are always chasing that escapement. And how do we integrate medicines in our lives in a more holistic, like Buddhist practice? Right. Well, and I mean, honestly, look at MDMA. I mean, who wouldn't want to chase that? I mean, if you do ecstasy, it feels good, right? But even in Buddhism, there's they are reticent to cultivate certain meditations that increase bliss because it's self-referential fixation. All it is basically a subtle form of hedonism. And so allegedly these beings go to higher realms, God realms, for 500 years and live at peace, bliss. And then they all their karma is burned and they lose it. The point is that doesn't necessarily get you home, and there's ways of using these. I mean, to me, I think that's a good point is, intention is really important. Aspiration is really important. Why are you doing this? And if it's just to get high, by all means, I'm the last person in the universe to judge such a motive. I promise you. But then just be honest about it, and it's not to just get high, but it's to wake up to some degree. Then the question becomes how much you got to do it, Otherwise, how much more, like ketamine, I love ketamine. I mean, I love injected ketamine, but I'm not sure it can take me much more. I'll do it a few more times with friends if they want to journey with me, but there's not much more I can get from it, you know. So, you know, I think, yeah, people can become competitive, consumptive, or hedonistic, but all I would say again is ego is everywhere. So ego will absolutely co-opt your spiritual trip. I mean, at some point, it's not a bad thing. It's just a fact you have to be aware of. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's just a good reminder, right? Like, what is your aspiration? That's the main thing. What's your intention? Why are you doing this? It's a great inquiry, and everyone has to answer that for themselves. You know, that's a great inquiry. And anytime you do a medicine, just like before you do a meditation, setting an aspiration, setting an intention, like I intend to be present, let's just say, my aspiration is that it benefit all beings. And after you've completed a good act or a positive act, dedicate the merit to all beings. May somehow this be a benefit to all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be happy and free from suffering, because that's what we actually all want. We want all beings to be happy. We want all beings to be free from suffering. So even if you can't effectuate that in your real life, one thing you can see about these medicines and meditation, and that's why in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, there's a heavy emphasis on visualization practices, which we don't need to get into too much right now. But my point is that, let me just say it this way. I don't know if there's a greater benefit to go, this is going to be a little brazen. I probably shouldn't say it this way, but I'm just going to say it to make the point. I don't know if it's better to go out the external world and help people, or if it's better to sit in a cave, you know, and work on your own mind. But I think aspiration matters a lot. You know, that's the main thing. And, you know, what's real is hard to say.
No, I hear you. Anyone else have a question for Kris? Just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Somebody have a question.
Or you can type a question in the chat. There must be some questions.
I covered everything. It's amazing.
I know.
Well, I don't even know about a question. That's fine. But anyone who wants to share their own personal experience too, anything that they think is relevant, whether I covered it or not, I would highly. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in the 12 people who are here. So feel free to share it. And it's okay if you don't want to, but.
Yep. Can you talk more about your experience with DMT?
Oh yeah, I got to do it again.
This was from Andre, but I'm not sure like as it relates to Buddhism or just in general, or maybe just in general. And then
can you answer it? Do you have any experience with that?
In general, your experience with DMT. So that would be like the toad medicine. That's a form, the toad medicine you mentioned having done, that is similar, you know, that is DMT. So,
right.
And then DMT would also be like ayahuasca and so forth, but you talked about having done the toad medicine. So,
right. If you're familiar with that stuff, Leo, could you answer that question?
Well, sure. I mean,
Thanks.
My experiences with DMT have been in the ayahuasca church and with the toad medicine and with the synthetic toad versus the natural toad. And the ayahuasca, I've done podcasts with folks about how it really changed my life and shifted my life. I feel like I was a very angry person and that I had gone through a very nasty custody battle. And so for me, it was something that I had done other medicines, but there's something about the ayahuasca that really shifted me. So I would say that before my experience, I was living through my daily life, but there was some quote you said today during this training, Kris, where you talked about, I don't know, like living in your body versus like thinking about, you said living your ideals versus being your ideals or something. And or thinking being run by your concepts of something versus whatever. And I felt like I wasn't really in my body in those years and I wasn't really enjoying my life and I wasn't enjoying my son. I was like doing what I was supposed to be doing, but I wasn't like there was another picture you had on here about change, but I also wasn't feeling my emotions. I wasn't feeling how sad I was, and I wasn't feeling how brokenhearted I was, and how I just was trying to be so strong, that we just embody that in our culture. So for me, the DMT experiences have always been ones that have kind of broken cycles of addiction, kind of like that, the ferocious thought of the Western mind that's constantly thinking. You said you're not going to think your way out of a problem, but I try every day.
Me too.
So yeah, so I feel like with the toad, I was able to break addictive thought cycles that I didn't. Other medicines had not been helpful in me breaking those addictive thought cycles, and those addictive thought cycles, I was their bitch. Like they had me, and they controlled me. And I'm not saying I don't struggle with depression or anxiety or stress or any of those things that anyone might, but I don't do it in a way now for me that I don't have the same kind of addictive qualities. And I could easily slip back into that. I appreciate you being so human about some of your own issues in terms of not being perfect or not being a guru. That was me. Anyone else have a question for Kris, or do you want to say anything about that, Kris?
Yeah, I do. I want to say, the quote, the mind makes a wonderful servant, but a horrible master, right? The mind makes a wonderful servant, but a horrible master. And as long as we're continually victims of our thoughts and our emotions, we're going to suffer, and the people around us are going to suffer. And this indication of being willing to be broken hearted is actually the sign of a spiritual warrior. That's literally the language of Chogyam Trungpa or Pema Chodron or any of the folks from Shambhala. If you read them, being willing to experience, we all say we want an open heart. We all say we want to be loving. You're not going to think your way to that. And as you also said, I've had a lot of addictions in my life, but the most pernicious one is being a thought addict.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question for Kris?
Or you?
Okay. I know that my husband shared his impression of, there was something that you said that he sent me a text message during the training where he said I needed to hear that. And the quote was, I was tired of living a life dictated by my thoughts and my emotions. And when you were talking about like how as children, if you had been pulled aside at like 7, you're like, well, that would be a handy thing to learn. Like all I could think was like children in Tibet. And I was like, I wonder if children in Tibet are like taught in school about like, don't let your feelings and emotions control you kids. And I personally loved when you started in the beginning by talking about like being in the emotional like self, like going down the elevator, you said, because I spend so much time in my head that a lot of times I have to ask myself, like, well, what are you feeling? What are you feeling? To just kind of get more into my heart.
Right. Yeah. It's a good practice, a good reminder. Yeah.
So what are, like, if you had just like some last thoughts before we close out for today, and I just want to thank you again so much for your time and your experiences. Just wondering anything else that you can think of, like as we face this crazy pandemic time where people are doing more exploration with psychedelics and a lot of them do come from these spiritual backgrounds such as yourself, but yet Seattle or King County or like Washington State right now is dealing with so much, and there can be so much in this time of year that's kind of the darker time of year and going inside ourselves for this season. And I'm just, wondering what.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of homelessness. I think, which is more pronounced in November than it is in June in terms of, heartbreak. I don't know, in terms of final thoughts, not quite on your thing, but I just, whatever we can do when you wake up in the morning, set an intention, when it go tonight, reflect how you've done, honestly. And, if you want to push the ball forward in terms of being more present, I mean, if you just think about, like I said earlier, how much of your life is lived in your head, it's kind of depressing. And so whatever we can do to push the ball forward to extricate ourselves, like your husband said, from the victimization of our thoughts and our emotions, anything we can do to open our heart and serve others and, be of benefit, I think it's overwhelming otherwise, right? You got the pandemic, you got homelessness, it's November. Sometimes I think, well, the best thing I can do is meditate 15 minutes a day. And it might sound like a cop out to a lot of people, meditate an hour a day. I mean, I totally get it. Sounds like a cop out. Again, I'm not trying to push meditation. People, they do. But if you want to push the ball forward, you should be doing, you got to do something. You got to do something that's non-habitual, So I think whatever we can do to push the ball forward is good. Time is short. You never know when it's going to end.
That's awesome. I mean, I just think so many of these concepts of death are so simultaneous with psychedelic experiences because people are like, I'm dying, my ego's dying, my fear's dying, my anger's dying, these things I hold on to rigidly that I think define me are dying, or am I currently dying? And as you're changing into something else, like you get more comfortable with death, maybe, Buddhism so much is kind of saying to these people in the United States who are so fearful to talk about death. And so many of us have questions or comments or concerns about death, and that we don't really talk about death as a culture. And then here's Buddhism that says, hey, everyone, we're all dying. And then we're going to come back around. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Tibetan Book of Living. Tibetan Book of the Dead in particular, where Ram Dass works out, they did their own version. But yeah, our culture is like, in terms of its relationship to suffering and death, is pretty shallow, I think. But I don't know.
Right. But I would even argue that the simple joy of being in the moment, like for a child in Tibet that has been raised with the concept of be here now, or be in my feelings, or recognize that emotions and thoughts can control me. I think that there are these kind of pockets of happiness, or these concepts of being in the moment, and that may be as good as it gets. And then the show's going to be over.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think being grateful and being here now is so beautiful. So thank you. And we'll see you around. Have a good one.
All right. Peace to everybody. Thank you so much.
Peace to everyone. Have a good one. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Take care, everyone. We're going to end the group, but wish you well. And next training, I think, is in a couple of weeks. So thank you, Kris. Okay. Take care.
Peace.
Okay. Bye-bye.